Video chat is ready to begin.
Hey everybody, it's David Spark. How you doing? It is, for many of you, just before spring break, so I appreciate you joining us for this live CISO series video chat. This is the last one before spring break, so we will not have a video chat next Friday, but we will have one the following Friday as well. So let me just get you quickly up to date. Many of you have seen this before since you're regulars, so you can tune out if you'd like for a moment. But today's topic is, just listen to this part, hacking the IT security gap, an hour of critical thinking of improving communications and control over digital processes. All right. Who is joining us? You can see them in the tinier windows down there, but they will be much larger again. It is Steve Gentry, the CSO for Clary, and Jeffrey DeMuro, the Deputy CISO over at ServiceNow. He's the one actually wearing his brand new ServiceNow sweatshirt. All right. And our sponsor is ServiceNow. Thank you so much, ServiceNow, for making this video chat possible. All right. 5 different ways you can participate in the chat room. As you can see, it's going on right now. Second, submit your bad ideas. The topic is hacking the IT security divide. As I believe it was Larry Rosen, these bad ideas will write themselves. Well, I'd like to see you write them, because if they write themselves, then nobody wins. You could win this, as you see I'm wearing, cool CISO series fleece. Join us on video at any time. You just type "bring me on" all in caps. Andrew, the producer, who's working in the background, will try to bring you on. Try to bring as many of you on as possible. Ask a question at any time. We see 2 questions are in already. But also vote for your favorite question, because there may be way too many for me to get to. And if you vote for your favorite question, I will get to those sooner than the other ones. All right, today's schedule, it's the same we've done all the time. We'll start with 20 minutes of questions, your questions, my questions, anybody's questions, the ones that write themselves. We'll do those. Then the poll will go live for our favorite bad idea. And you really do need to, whoops, what? That's not what I want to do. This is what I want to do.
Send them in. We need your bad ideas.
Yes, because at 20 or 30 minutes past the hour, we'll play Beat the Bad Idea. Your voted up best bad ideas, and we will do as many of those as we can. Then we'll go back to voting for your favorite questions. And then at 45 minutes past the hour, we'll play the What's Worse game. And our winner from last week, Kira Wojak. Thank you so much, Kira. She'll be coming on camera and asking you the 2 bad ideas that will go head to head in a What's Worse showdown. So, Kira, make sure to get those into us by 30 minutes past the hour. All right. And then we'll have time just for the last question and some final advice. And then we will roll over into the icebreaker, which is our cybersecurity speed dating. And I hope you can all stick around for that, because it is a lot of fun. Next show is going to be April 16th. So 2 weeks from today. The topic is hacking cloud security myths. I've actually been doing a lot of content about this, writing about this. It's an hour of critical thinking of the truths and lies around securing a cloud environment. This is going to be a fun topic as well. So you can click the link at the bottom to register for that video chat. It will not take you out of this video chat at all. You can just, stay where you are. That's it. All right. And then stick around for the icebreaker. But we'll get to that in just a second. All right. Now I got all that out. We're done. Now, let's start with the very opening basic question. I'm going to start with you, Steve. The discussion is hacking the IT security gap. I have lots and lots of ideas of what that is. Please tell me from your viewpoint what you believe is that actual gap, Steve.
So from my point, I think the gap that is either real or perceived comes from a couple of different things. And it's that communication factor between IT and security organizations, often because I feel one of them is lagging behind in modernization. You have a security organization that still believes they're the gatekeeper of everything. They're the no organization. Or you have an IT organization who is functioning in the same mentality of like, hey, we control all the assets. You can't go swipe a credit card, even though people do. So, we have to own everything. So we're going to also be the no organization. And then the two are battling out, often probably because they don't feel like they have a seat at the big kids table. And so they're the child that is acting up. And when that happens, you have this gap between the two organizations that starts being formed as they're trying to work through those processes that are trying to behave better or working through their temper tantrum.
All right. So, Jeffrey, I'm going to take this. I'm assuming you agree with this sort of philosophy of like there's these temper tantrums, but there's some real things that need to actually be done, and they're just causing problems from themselves, right, Jeffrey?
Absolutely. And as Steve said, it's okay to say no every now and then, but the no has to come with a but, right? We have to be enablers. Both IT and security have to be enablers at the end of the day. And I think Steve would agree with that. It's no but. And then after the temper tantrums are over, then you need to sit down and understand how to get the job done. Whatever it is, whatever tool you're bringing in, whatever application you're developing. And one of the things we've done lately is shared goals. And, everybody talks about orchestration, and we could talk about orchestration and communication and review boards and all that good stuff. And you can put that into practice. But until you actually have shared goals up into your CIO, I think that's where the rubber meets the road.
Good question that just came in from Larry Rose, and I'm going to ask this one. When security reports up to IT management, how do you convince them that security is as, if not more important than, quote, uptime? And do they understand the difference between security and uptime, Steve?
Well, that depends on the security leader. I'm actually going to put the onus on that one. If you're having issues with the IT organization, yes, there's going to be some potential personality challenges at the CIO level. However, if security is not able to articulate what their purpose is, if they're already always talking about a tool, if they're talking about this metric that they need to accomplish and not discussing the outcomes they're trying to achieve, that's typically where you get into that challenge, because you're just trying to keep us from, you're just trying to make sure we meet this audit checkbox. You're just trying to make sure that, you've disabled USB ports because your auditor told you so. If you're not discussing the outcomes, you're going to continue to have that. You're just here for security uptime issues. You're here to prevent breaches. Or as I was told one time, you're here to make sure we never had a breach, which is not possible in the security world. Right. You're going to just keep banging heads that way. So again, I put that onus back on the security leadership to learn how to be good communicators and stop being the, hey, look at me, stop being the Chicken Little. The sky is not always falling. Here's what we're trying to achieve from an outcome point of view.
And Jeffrey, to what level are security's goals and IT's goals match? So I got to assume it's some type of Venn diagram where there's a crossover. How much are they closing on a full circle? How far are they apart?
And I think that, David, great question. I think that's what I was getting to before. I think that Venn diagram and where it overlaps has to get larger and larger. And I think the way to drive that is through shared responsibilities and shared goals. Otherwise, they diverge rather quickly. IT is running, security is running either behind them, hopefully alongside them, to enable them as they're running really fast. And, over the last year, especially with COVID, all of us have been running super, super fast. And that's where security has to be that enabler, has to run alongside, can't be trailing too far behind as that enabler.
So let me ask then, where you say they have to have shared goals. Give me just one example of one that's commonly not shared that can easily be shared, and what's the net benefit of that?
Steve started to get into this. Security has to be part of your DNA, and it really needs to be part of that development process. So when you're working with your IT, when you're working with your developers, when you have your scrums in your agile environment, and I think that's where also it helps, is to be involved early on and often. And I think that the developers and the IT people get used to, okay, here comes Alice, Bob, or Charlie again from the security department. I don't want to hear from them again. So I understand. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to make it part of my process going forward.
Okay. And maybe you can also give it a specific example, Steve, yourself, about where you can form a shared responsibility that wasn't there maybe a year or 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Thinking about the remote workspace, yes, you have IT that's typically managing the remote work environment. I have been lucky the last two organizations, my current organization, the previous, we haven't had any infrastructure in-house except for routers and switches. So being able to move everybody into the remote workspace has been fantastic. But talking to my peers, those who haven't been in that situation, is they've been working through, it wasn't just a matter of how do we enable a remote worker, it's how are we securing this environment where they're potentially bringing their own devices, where they're potentially grabbing their own laptop and doing that goes beyond, we always had that occasionally, but it has become so much more prevalent in the last year, thanks to the pandemic, that looking at how we're securing our SaaS applications, and also thinking of some traditional spaces that haven't been using SaaS apps like healthcare, that have now, because of remote workers, have had to start looking beyond their own perimeters to quickly meet the needs of remote workers. Or like, hey, we don't have 6 months to spin up the infrastructure to support this, so we've got to do this now. Hey, security, can you sit in with this as we're putting more controls into place? However, that controls have to go with the user experience, which is often one of those things that I think security and IT falls down on, is considering that the user experience when they're rolling things out.
Let me ask a question to both of you. I'm sorry, just because I remember the early days of when we all had to go to work from home, that there were a lot of security departments that had to take on the role of IT. Did that actually help in the bond or make things worse, Jeffrey?
I think it absolutely helped. One of the things that we did, everybody went to collaboration, and I'm not going to name the different names of the tools that people use for video collaborations, but at the same time, we all needed to roll it out. Right. But at the same time, you needed to think about the security. How many of us hit the record button when we have a collaboration? And I'm trying not to use the word of the vendor, but and then what happens to that? What happens to that recording? Where does it go? How could it escape or be exfiltrated from your environment? There are legitimate purposes for sending that out, but there are also a lot of illegitimate purposes, and you don't know what's recorded on those calls. So this is where we worked very, very closely with IT to think about the different scenarios. Yes, we had to hurry up and get it out to all 13,000 of ServiceNow employees, and it went quite well. But we needed to, like I said, run alongside security to make sure that we were securing those recordings and understanding from a policy perspective what could and could not be recorded, or should and should not be recorded. So
this, one of the positives that's come from this horrible situation is that this great need that was required on both sides has forced, a coming together. Yes? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, David. I would absolutely agree that we're working much more tightly together. And the principles of security, I think, are being embedded earlier on in the development process or in the acquisition of a new vendor process, whatever it is. I think it's happening earlier on through agile development. Again, we talk about that communication, but this is where goals and the way we incentivize people, I think, are going to change.
Hey, Steve, this is a good question, and you may not have personal viewpoint into it. You may have to speak to friends, and then Jeffrey, I want your answer to this as well. But this is very much on target here. From Craig Herder, he asks, how is the IT security gap impacted by organizations in which security reports up through the CIO as opposed to actually having a seat directly on the board? So essentially, their information filtered one level, I guess is kind of the best way to see it. Steve?
So I'm going to share a potentially unpopular opinion. As I was as I started at my current role about 6 months ago, as I was interviewing with different companies, I would have a couple questions here and there that I was asking around the reporting structure. And I was particularly avoiding organizations where I would be reporting into the CIO. So I started in IT 33 years ago as a help desk technician.
As did, by the way, I found out our producer as well, Andrew as well.
And so I've been through that IT space. I had some security opportunities and moved over. One of the reasons I did that is I often found that IT still had a bit of a legacy mindset when security was reporting into the CIO. You still hear things like IT security. Well, that's from a theoretical standpoint, it is IT security when you're talking information technology, but it's not in the same mindset of what IT is always trying to accomplish. As we're trying to move the needle on securing that personal data, we can come in direct conflict with IT. So it's being able to understand if you're reporting into a CIO, what are those differentiations that you're going to have to deal with as you're working through? What is it you're going to have to, potentially butt heads with your boss on? As you're trying to discuss the outcomes, as you're trying to put things in a context of what it is on a business objective and driving that conversation, and not just as a security need. But what are some of the understanding where that CIO has their mindset? Are they more of a legacy mindset? Is IT the gatekeeper? Are they owner of everything? And there aren't business organizations that are allowed to touch anything technology wise. That's what, to me, that's one of the big challenges in having that filtered message, that they're still putting the IT lens on it and not the lens of, hey, this is security, that we're trying to protect the personal data. And we also, security may even own privacy. And as Matt found out in chat when he made the bad idea of like have IT report to InfoSec, and the number of people who have responded saying, hey, like that is how my org works. I'm in that boat as well.
Maybe not so bad.
This organization, but have been in there before. So making sure that you understand what your boss's filter is, because you are going to have times they're just like, no, we don't want to be able to enable this because we're losing our control. And security is like, but yeah, we're actually gaining security if we go down this path.
All right.
So I'm going to,
your take on this.
I'm going to take a little bit different of a path here. Not that I disagree with Steve, but I think you can support both sides.
Well, I think you have to, because companies are doing both.
Without a doubt. And David, we had talked about this, before the show. The fact is that the CISO, going back 10 or 15 years ago, didn't have a seat at the table when the board of directors meeting came around. Everything would be funneled through the eyes and the ears and the perspective of the CIO. The good news is that not only do we have a seat at the big boys table, but that we're getting more and more time. We're getting more and more of an audience. The board of directors is very, very focused on security. In our organization, the head of IT and the CISO report up through the CIO, and the CIO has that balance, right? We talked about the delicate balance between IT and the office of the CISO. And I think that's where the CIO plays really an important role, not as judge and jury, but at the same time as judge and jury, right? To balance both perspectives. You asked the question before about SLAs versus security. That's what the CIO has to keep in mind every day. So I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer here. I think it's how your organization is set up, and those lines of communications line of communication is so important.
The question for both of you: have you seen the CIO role evolve? And without me putting any words in your mouth, what have been like the two significant ways you've seen the CIO role evolve? And again, let's just, small time frame of just a couple of years. Steve, I'll start with you.
So I would say, as I've seen evolution in the IT organization, the CIO role, a lot come about because of the push to cloud, as they've had to learn how to let go of some of the control, not be managing the infrastructure and potentially using cloud service providers. It's that mentality change of, okay, how do I gain visibility? How do I provide a user experience? Because that's a conversation I'm hearing a lot more about CIOs now, is what's the user experience we're providing, and how do we get that without having to create additional overhead? So to me, that's one of the biggest things that I'm really excited about, and why I end up having IT report to me is because it's one of the drivers I have in security. So it's been a fun conversation to work with my peers on, hey, like, what are we accomplishing by this, but how does it user impact? If you create the bad user experience, that's when shadow IT really takes off, because people are finding the creative ways to get around it. And you not only have a bad IT experience, but you're now worsening the security posture.
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Steve, I think you're spot on. And, having worked for two major banks before I crossed the chasm and came over to the cloud side, you're exactly right. That's what was happening, is that if you looked at your outbound proxy, you were seeing more and more cloud use. And employees were using whatever tools they needed to get their job done. And the CIO really had no control over that. And, when I worked for one of those major banks, the knee-jerk reaction was, got to shut it all down. And I don't think that was the right call. And the good news is, before we got to the board of directors, we talked about, well, let's look at the telemetry. Let's look at why they're doing what they're doing and enable them, right? It shouldn't be that I'm using 50 different clouds, but what are the reasons that people are using the cloud? And then let's make sure that we have the proper agreements in place and the controls in place to use those clouds correctly. And the reason that I crossed the chasm over to this side was because I saw the evolution that the CIO was going to get as good, if not better, telemetry than they were getting in-house. That's how good, I think, when you look at the major cloud providers, that's how good of reporting and logging you can get from purposely built solutions.
All right. I just want to let everyone know that the poll is live. The poll, our video chat, the best bad idea poll for the video chat is now live. So what I need all of you to do is vote for your favorite bad idea. And I've seen some darn good ones. A lot have come in. So kudos to all of you for that. We just so you know, we announced the winner the following week. And the past week's winner, Kira, you have to go in and pick 2 of the bad ideas that will go head to head in a what's worse face off. But also I want all of you to vote on the poll, because those will determine what questions I ask both Jeffrey and Steve as well. And also, let me remind you to click the link at the bottom of the screen. That is for in 2 weeks. Remember, next week we're off, but in 2 weeks we're doing the CISO series video chat. Topic is hacking the cloud security myths. And to stick around at the end of the hour for our meetup, which is always a ton of fun. All right. Here's a good question that came in from Ian Pointer. And he says, if a CISO is reporting to the CIO, which is, I'm going to just say, it's the most common sort of reporting structure. I know there's a lot of others going to the CEO, reversing it. Also know they go reporting to legal and to finance, and those are some other options as well. But if the CISO is reporting to the CIO, and by the way, I should mention this probably would play into other things that if they don't have a seat at the table. So it could be CIO or any of the other ones I mentioned earlier. What strategies would you use to make sure the security voice is heard at the board level? Steve, this is not currently your situation, but have you had that situation?
Yes, had the situation. And absolutely the normal process in the world out there is the CISO reporting to the CIO. Yeah. The only place you see the reverse in a more, you see a CISO reporting to a CTO typically in the SaaS world. So the tech space, this is the only place where it's actually become very popular to drive other ways. Mm-hmm. So again, going back to comments, I could use Ian's bad idea from earlier. Not the best bad idea, but still a funny one, was using D&D dice to say, okay, like we're going to sit down. If I roll a nat 20, then okay, we're going to do my security objective instead of this IT objective. But ultimately, the way
bad
to be
odds for you, you'd want to up the odds a little bit.
Yeah, I know. But ultimately, it goes back to what we've talked about earlier. You've got to be tied to your business objectives. If your security objectives are not tied to what the business is trying to accomplish, if you don't know what your CIO is trying to accomplish and you're not aligned to his objectives, you're not going to get it pushed through. So make sure that you understand all my goals. I actually start at the top of, here are corporate objectives. Here are my goals that are associated with those corporate objectives. And so there's always a line, a direct path going up. And if you don't have that, then inspect yourself and start over on what you're trying to get accomplished.
All right. What's your advice, Jeffrey?
It's already there. I'm not sure you really need to push it between your auditors and your risk registers. It's part of the DNA. I'm sorry to use that word, but it's part of the board. It's part of the board presentation. It's there. I don't think you need the CIO to push the objective anymore. It's the first thing. It's the first 2 or 3 things on the board's mind, especially these days with the past attacks over the past couple of months.
All right, Sue. Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to go on that one. It is on the board's mind. So the board is often asking security questions. The problem is they're missing that context. And if it's filtered from a technology point of view and not either a risk or a company objectives point of view, that's where we're getting lost at the board level. And so I'm not disagreeing with you on that, Jeff. It's just making sure that when the board's asking the questions, that you're anticipating that and you're actually sharing what the real risk is to the organization based on the business objectives, and not just like, hey, well, we've got this tool though that has put things in place, because that's what our vendors like to tell us.
No doubt, but that enterprise risk and the risk security scorecard is embedded. It's one of the highlighted sections of your board report every couple of months. So I don't think it gets lost. Could we absolutely do better? Absolutely. But I don't think at least in our case, it is very front and center.
All right, got a good question from Rick Woodward. And by the way, just remind everybody, you have 5 minutes to vote, and there's not enough votes in, and there's more of you than there are votes. So go in, and I wish you could vote more than once, but the system doesn't let you vote more than once. I wish that was a capability, but unfortunately not. All right, from Rick Woodward, I'm going to send this one to you, Jeffrey, because this seems right on target for you. Security and IT operations integrate heavily. And, I know that is a charge for service now, but I've never seen the metrics mesh well together. How can security and IT metrics be combined to give the business an understanding of the overall quality of technology services?
Again, I go back to that risk scorecard and the security scorecard. It's there. It's something we produce. I think it's something that most companies produce in terms of understanding that metrics between those shared goals. And where you are on the evolution of your of fixing and resolving those issues so that you can go faster.
Now, hold it. Let me isolate down to specifics here. Okay, patching, asset management, remediation. Those three in particular. Just walk me through some basics here of where that sort of mesh can happen and give more visibility to the whole organization.
So I think what you're talking about is in terms of AppSec, right? In terms of application security, as you're developing, again, in that agile environment, you're going fast. You're going as fast as you can to get new products, new releases to market as quickly as possible. And IT is doing a fantastic job in evolving the features. But that's where security has to play that speed bump. I hate to use that word, but it is a speed bump in terms of slowing them down enough that you can't go to market with medium and high risks. Lower risks, which you can work on during the evolution of the code through patches, but you can never go to market with a medium and high risk.
Okay. All right. By the way, thank you very much. We got the what's worse scenarios in from Kira. Thank you very much for coming in. You'll be ready at around 45 minutes past the hour to do that. We are just a few minutes away from playing the Beat the Bad Idea game. This is a common one. Anatoly C. asked this question. How do you address the gap between perception of how secure you are versus the actual reality? And also, I would also go to say, just asking the question of how secure are we, I know is a real misnomer. Steve?
Yeah, I always love that question. Are we secure? And it's just like, well, what do you mean by that? I mean, yes, I've got a healthy ego, so I'm very secure in myself. But if you're talking about the security of our organization, that's a very different topic. And so I use that as an education experience. And when that question gets asked, and referring back to a risk register, and Jeffrey was talking about earlier, having that risk register where you can tie things back to and say, hey, this is what our risk posture looks like. Oh, by the way, we also, if you don't know what your risk tolerance is, having that to balance against it, like this is our risk posture, this is our risk tolerance. So here's our top risks. Here's what we're dealing with. So ultimately, our security is how well we're addressing, mitigating, remediating, accepting those risks. One of the things I present up is I actually present the accepted risks on a regular basis and keep a running tally of like, well, this executive has accepted 10 risks in the last, and especially around the vendors, as you're working with SaaS vendors, this exec has accepted 10 risky vendors in the last 6 months. We probably should have this conversation. So being able to point to specific things and say, well, let's talk about this aspect of our security program and this aspect of are we secure, not just are we secure as a company, because we'll always have holes.
All right, we are trying to get Rick Woodward to come on. He's sort of on, but his face is not showing up.
Can you see me?
Hopefully are you there, Rick? Can we hear you?
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can't see you. Go ahead. Ask your question. We'll do it. Just your lovely voice. Unfortunately, you've got a Space Invaders icon right now.
Yeah, no worries. My question, I wanted to dig a little deeper on comparing apples to oranges between IT goals and security goals from a budgetary perspective. So if there's, say, $10,000 for the IT budget and they're trying to spread that for security and for operations, How can we present a picture for the needs of both sides of that organization so that the people who hold the purse strings can make an informed decision that's for what's going to be best for the business?
I got to assume that's a good question, because I got to assume that question is common, comes up all the time. Yes,
I've definitely
Steve?
seen it come up a lot.
Yes. So what's
Yes.
the logical way to do it? And Jeffrey, I definitely want your take on this. Go ahead, Steve.
This is going to come back to when you're talking the prioritization. What are the business objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? Do you have a prioritized list? So if you're reporting into the CIO and you're working through that same budget, which is why security budget is sitting in there, have you guys taken the time to actually sit down and do the prioritization activities? And if you have, then it should be a relatively easy discussion, because if you're asking for dollars for something that's prioritized higher because of a risk, because it's something you're trying to mitigate or remediate, then it's a misnomer. But if you haven't taken the time to put the foundational work in place and it's always an ad hoc process, that's where you're going to keep bumping your head against who gets to spend the dollars.
All right.
Great.
Good. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I was going to say, Steve, great point. And we very recently adopted the FAIR methodology from a risk perspective, right? And I'll align that to NIST. And we've moved more to a quantitative risk and not just saying that's high, that's medium, that's low. Now I can put a dollar amount. So for every dollar I put in, I can actually start to measure where I'm lowering my risk and look at my ROI, right? And not make sure that I'm not having diminishing returns for every dollar I put in. So it makes the conversation, I was going to say argument, but it's really not. It makes the conversation a lot easier when you can quantify how that dollar is being spent and for what.
All right. You know what that is time for? Thank you very much, Jeffrey. It is time for...
It's time to play Beat the Bad Idea.
All right. No shortage of bad ideas that came in this time. I appreciate them. And I saw this one come in earlier, so I'm going to ask this one right away. I'll ask you, Steve. You know how this game is played. It's a horrible idea. It is in play. What controls are you going to put around it to beat the bad idea? And this one is charge IT a fee for every time that they violate a security policy. Use those funds to buy more SIM capability to keep the money rolling in. How are you going to beat that bad idea? Or I'm going to throw this out. Is that a bad idea?
Yeah, I was going to say I would actually tie it when we're charging them. We're going to actually tie it to my personal Venmo account, and that's how we're going to cover security offsites. We're heading, as we're going to go Mykonos is where we're holding our security offsite next year. As we're charging IT.
It's like it's like having the swear jar in your household. Yeah.
I don't know
$1 in there.
If it's necessarily a bad idea. It's I would roll that across the company. So my way of mitigating that is I would just make it available to everybody who, the third time someone says, is this a phishing email? Well, what about it is not a phishing email? Like, why are you asking? If you're concerned, what are the things that are highlighting? So anytime someone asks some of those repeat questions, or if you're in a salesperson says, hey, I need this document that I've asked for the same document, 3 times in the last month, charge them as well. So I'm going to expand the program to just beyond IT and charge everybody for their either bad security ideas or misconfigurations. All
right. I'm going to ask the same question. By the way, I didn't give you the proper voting, but good job. Sorry. Much louder than that. Good answer, Steve. All right, Jeffrey, can you top that? Charge IT a fee for every time that they violate a security policy. Use those funds to buy more SIM capability, keep the money rolling in. What do you say to that? How are you going to beat this bad idea? And again, it may not be a bad idea.
Might not be a bad idea. I tend to agree with Steve. Let's get that swear jar out. Let's start to fund all of our other bad ideas with this bad idea.
I like it. I like it. All right. What was the other one? There was another one I liked that came in. I like this one. Steve, let me see. By the way, I'm sorry. I did not give you the credit. Good job on that one, Jeffrey. All right. Steve, this one, make all remote workers sign a liability clause, passing all security requirements and diligence to them. Again, not a bad idea.
You're killing me today, David. I'm trying to be creative on how I would continue. So, oh man. Can I use pass? No. So as we pass that liability on to them, this is where I would tie in, going back to the insider threat conversation from last week, add some of those tools to add that insider threat. And then again, tie that back to the last conversation that anytime they violate that, they're putting in the money that we're then using as part of our security swear jar. So if we have that mechanism in place where we've put the liability, we then have the ability to charge them every time they violate policy. So again, all for it. Let's do it. Let's put the viability on there because, what does security know that they're doing? The end user knows best in their own home environment and computer. So let's trust them.
All right. Sir, yes, sir. I like it. All right. Jeffrey, I'm throwing this one to you as well. You're going to push all liability to your remote workers.
I love it. And while we're at it, why don't we put a monitor on them so we can follow them around where they go, what they do. And if they go too far, then we can shock them. And then we can have the corporate police come and take them back to their house where we can monitor where their device is. So absolutely, let's do this.
This is such a great, by the way, Jeffrey, just so you know, we're going to pull that quote that you just said, have no context around it. Just put it on the internet. Let's see what happens. Oh, yeah! I like it. All right. Good answers, everyone around. And by the way, I know there were a few more that were very nicely voted, but Kira has actually picked a couple of those for our What's Worse. So I'm holding on to those that we're going to play at around 45 minutes past the hour. And it is, sorry, my clock is sort of in a weird way. That's how I have to do this. That'll be in about 10 minutes. Okay, let's get back to the questions. Please feel free to throw in a question. We've actually gotten to a lot of questions right now.
The security shock collar. Did you see that, David? We got a trademark.
I like that. You know what? The image was of Schwarzenegger in The Running Man, where they all had to wear those collars around their neck. I see no problem with getting a house arrest, bracelet around, or ankle bracelet around all these remote workers. Why not? All right. Andrew Armstrong, who works with you, Jeffrey, would be curious if others have found ways to address what I was asking earlier, vulnerability management, patching, and asset management as common core challenges between security and IT. I'm going to throw this one because I essentially asked that question of you, Jeffrey. I don't think I ever got to you, Steve. So, Steve, what are you doing with regards to all three of those with the security and IT?
I'm taking the ostrich approach and just burying my head in the sand.
Oh,
if you're
bad
not
idea.
looking at vulnerability management,
we're not playing Beat the Bad Idea anymore.
Oh, sorry. No, this is an area that I think there's always going to be this challenge. Is you're working with, this is one of those areas that security and IT can come in conflict, and it goes back to a question asked earlier, but a slightly reverse. So it's that uptime conversation that IT is responsible for with infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And depending on how the infrastructure is built out, is there enough redundancy in place? Do we have the right infrastructure there where we can patch on a regular basis? Mm-hmm. But often the patching is done not necessarily to patch security holes. That I've seen security take mindset of like, hey, well, this patch has been released. If we're PCI compliant, we need to get a clean scan. Right. Or our customers are asking for a scan report. So they're doing it not because they're trying to make the environment more secure. They're doing it because they have to report to somebody and they want it to look really good. Mm-hmm. It's having that conversation of how do we make sure that the patching is done, vulnerabilities are addressed in a way, looking outside the app side, but looking at infrastructure in a way that allows us to keep a secure but reliable environment that we're not missing our SLAs in a customer-facing space.
I haven't asked this really basic question, but let me see if we can boil it down to some simple things. Where specifically, Jeffrey, are communications breaking down between IT and security? Like, can we just boil down the basics of this?
Well, I think sometimes I think we're lucky. I'm lucky because I've always worked with good program and project managers, mm-hmm. where that communication starts from the initial idea. So security is brought in, but I think that's where it breaks down is when you have these ideas that germinate in a meeting room or over a collaboration call where only IT knows about it, and you don't have that agile scrum where you're bringing in the proper architects, the proper security people, the IT people, legal people, compliance people to really round out how you're going to go forward. So I think it all really starts with understanding what projects and programs are in play and that they're not being germinated in a back room.
All right, I'm going to ask this question that came in from Phil Wolf, even though it's not exactly on target, but I'll just quickly ask it of you, Steve. Which firms do you go to for your post-breach CISO grief counseling?
Jack and Daniels. They're a fantastic firm that yeah. I wish that something exists. If anybody on that's listening wants to get something in place, we could actually use that whole virtual hug
counseling
process. As we're going through, because we have a lot of expectations on us, not just for security, but also IT. You're gonna say something, David.
Hold it, wait, don't you as CSO have to act as a grief counselor to others?
Yes. As we're going through this whole process of a breach. So at a previous company, I have gone through the process of having to address breaches. You're not sleeping. You're working, because you're working like 22 to 24 hours a day to address, especially in the first while. And you've got all these questions coming in of how did you guys fail? How did you guys fail? It's like, we don't have visibility. We're not gods. I mean, despite my personality, I actually am not a god. And so it's having that concept of, we're going through all of this, but we have so many expectations that we're trying to keep others, and it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. This isn't as bad as it looks. We're going to be able to recover as a company. Yes, it's going to cost us money to do so. And then once it's all done, people go about their lives, and we're just sitting there picking up the pieces of the organization we couldn't even get work done on for the past several weeks as we were trying to address the initial breach implementation. So it's exhausting. And it was a rough. The gray hair came in after that, through that process.
Jeffrey, have you had to deal with breaches with your customers?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it as Steve was saying, you turn to the Jack Daniels. I love that comment, and also it reminded me of George Thorogood and the Johnny Walker too. But anyway, yeah, it's always an unfortunate conversation to deal with customers after they've been breached, because 99.99% of the time it's not the provider, it's a configuration or an inconsistent use of a tool that allowed that
party
breach.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, we've heard these stories so many times. Yes,
and it's sitting down with the customer and doing what Steve said, a little grief counseling, and they're not easy conversations because under the shared responsibility model, you don't want to tell a customer or somebody else that it was their fault, right? So you want to absorb it the best you can and work towards how do I ensure that my customers, how do you blur that shared responsibility line and ensure your customers are configuring your tools and your capabilities to the best of their capabilities.
All right.
Or
go ahead.
One quick example. There's a different group I'm part of on Slack. There was actually a vendor who was trying to tell their customers it would be their fault, that they wouldn't share their SOC 2 report. Someone was posting this as they were going through a vendor review process. The vendor was said, we can't share our SOC 2 report with you because if we shared our SOC 2 report and it's restricted, you would now be liable as part of a class action lawsuit if we were ever breached.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry. Did you just say it's our responsibility if you get breached as a customer? It was just, it's one of these things that you do outside of attorneys. Everyone else is like, hey, we're here to help. Attorneys are like, no, it's your fault.
Right. So
all right, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, David. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
I was looking at some of the questions and I'm seeing JD as a service, which I thought was hysterical, right? Just a quick gratuitous plug. We're actually creating, and Steve, I'll talk to you about this offline. I'm in the middle of creating a SaaS ISAC to actually help talk about vulnerabilities and talk about things behind the scenes and do that grief counseling with other like-minded corporations. I know there's FS ISAC and there's a health ISAC and there's all types of ISACs out there, but there wasn't one for the cloud. So we're actually putting it together. So if anybody's interested out there, please contact me.
All right. A couple of things. Kira, I want you to get Kira on for our next game. And also, just because we are, we have about 15 minutes out from wrapping this up. So we're going to play one more game, and we're going to be also rolling into our icebreaker at the end. So please stick around for that. It is a lot of fun. If you have not done it already, please click the link below to register for, in 2 weeks, our next video chat, which is going to be Hacking Cloud Security Measures. Should be a lot of fun. And let's get Kira on to do the What's Worse game. And also, when it comes back, hold tight, Kira. When we come back after the game, we're going to ask one final question. So please get the one question, the final wrap-up question you want both Steve and Jeffrey to answer for you. So with that being said...
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right. For those of you who don't know the What's Worse game, this is a risk management exercise. So the idea is you're given two horrible scenarios, and we both know that they're awful, and which one is the worst of the two. Our winner from last week is Kira Wojak, who, by the way, Kira, I cannot for the life of me now remember what was your bad idea. What was it?
It was to... You're putting me on the spot here.
I can look it up. Hold on.
Yeah, it was to have everyone on your team report breaches, and then the people who found the biggest breaches, fire them.
Right. That was it. What a great misguided bad idea. I loved it. It's a superbly bad idea. All right. By the way, you're getting one of these awesome fleeces. By the way, I've moved suppliers, so everything's been delayed a few weeks, but it is coming. Just want you to know it is coming. All right. So you have two horrible ideas that you have picked from the best bad ideas. Please present them to both Steve and Jeffrey, and you can pick which one you'd like to answer first.
Sounds great. Yeah, I felt drunk with power on this decision. So which is worse between have all security concerns run through the help desk and their prioritization matrix, or alternatively, have IT and InfoSec both report to sales and marketing. Whoever can advertise themselves better in every issue wins.
They're both pretty bad.
All right. So who do you want to answer first, Kira?
Oh man, either person.
Pick one.
Okay.
Steve or Jeffrey? Jeffrey, you're first. Answer this. Which one's worse?
Which one's worse? I think is having everything report up to sales.
Sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing.
Why? Why is it worse?
I think security gets thrown out of the window very quickly because the top line, right? You need all.
But they're going to advertise which one they think is best, right, Kira?
Clearly.
Yeah, so they're actually going to look into it and figure out which one's worse.
Oh,
or you get the help desk to prioritize whichever way they do it through their matrix. So which one's worse? Having the marketing department essentially advertise the worst ones, or having the help desk through whatever their mechanism is through their their prioritization system, like their ticket system, whatever it is. Which one's worse?
Yeah,
advertise or ticket system. I guess that's the way to boil it down.
I'm still going to go with marketing.
And why is that?
Because of the way they don't have the tools to deal with it. I'd rather have a help desk dealing with which issue they thought was worse, or how they would go about solving a problem than the marketing department. It's just the thought process that differs greatly between those two.
All right, I take this one to you, Steve.
I'm actually going to disagree with Jeffrey on this one. As the head of security of a SaaS company, I know that security is used as a market differentiation. And so I know that sales and marketing are picking me over our IT organization who's on the back end. So absolutely, if they want to run it and be in charge, I know I'm going to get my funding over the IT org. And so for me, the worst idea is actually having the help desk do the prioritization, because the control mechanisms put in place as they're doing the prioritization does not have the consideration or the ability to understand the scope or scale of what security impacts. And so I know I'm going to get my funding. So yay, sales and marketing. Woohoo!
We're giving that winner to Steve there. Yeah, because they can really sell they can really sell what is the best bad idea, what's worse. Kira, thank you so much. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kira. All right. We get another question that came in, and we are just about 10 minutes from wrapping this sucker up. All right, Ian Pointer asked a good question here. All right, I asked a similar question to this video I was doing the other day. I'm going to throw this one to you, Jeffrey, first. What one thing would you change in the way IT usually works? If if either, I don't know, using your application, getting them to stop doing this or to start doing that, wave a magic wand, what would you have them do? One thing. It has to be only one thing. And don't make it too grandiose.
Blanking on this one.
All right, pause. Steve,
I'm
throwing it to you.
So one thing I would change about IT is making the user experience the in focus. Making sure we know where we're going, what we're trying to accomplish, and how it's impacting the user workflow, to get them to put that consideration in place in every project that they have, and not just have it as an endpoint that they're thinking about, oh crap, I guess we got to discuss this. Kind of like how security has been used in the past of like, oh yeah, we're already done, but we'll ask security anyways.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to throw this good answer on that. And then, by the way, I'm going to add one final wrap up for both of you. Jeffrey, what's the one thing you'd like changed?
Again, I think Steve covered some of it, but I guess I would like them to think about security as much as they can as they're pushing their development forward. I talked about DNA before, and again,
Right.
we keep pressing it earlier and earlier in the conversation. So I guess that would be the one thing that I would change, is that security has to be a priority. It has to be a co-priority. I'm not saying, again, run behind or run in front, but run alongside. All
right. By the way, Kira, being that she works in marketing PR herself, is very pro your answer from the What's Worse game. So kudos to you, Steve. All right. We're gonna wrap this up just a few minutes early this time. So what I'd like to do right now for both of you, this whole discussion is about the hacking the IT security gap. Let me actually, before I push to you, I'm going to actually share my final screen, just our last thoughts, and just to remind everybody to stick around for our icebreaker. By the way, Andrew, you can change the link at the bottom of the screen. That's going to change in just a second. Andrew will change that. And you can, by the way, you can click now actually you can click on that now to register for next in 2 weeks, but you can click on it when it changes to open up the other window, and then we'll all kind of roll into there when this all wraps up. Let me just remind you that tell your friends to join us. We do this every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. He just changed it. So you can click that link right now. It'll, again, open up another window. You'll need to log in via a Google account of some sort, and then put in your full name, because what happens is we're all going to get randomly matched up in a series of 5-minute one-on-one meetings. Thanks again to ServiceNow. Thank you so much for making this event possible. We really, really appreciate it. This was a really fun conversation, and I'm going to have to take a look at this chat log. There was some great conversation in the chat and some really funny stuff as well, so greatly appreciate that as well. Do you want to sponsor an upcoming video chat yourselves? Well, just email me at david@cisoseries.com. We have, I think our first opening is late May will be our first opening for that. So happy to do that with you. All right. With the few minutes we have left off, I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey. What is your final thought for our audience in terms of those struggling with this very IT security gap issue? And please make a plug for ServiceNow here if there's any offer that you specifically want to give to our audience.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is we have to be security has to be seen as an enabler. But it's okay to say no. And we shouldn't be afraid to say no. But hopefully the no comes with a comma, and it's no because of this, and here's the way to do it. Here's what the parameters are. Here's how it's acceptable. And I think one of the things, we have a now on now program. So of course we drink our own champagne, use our own product. And what we're all about, of course, is workflow. Anybody that uses the ServiceNow applications, and we use that workflow to our advantage. So whenever there is a new product, whenever there is a new initiative, it's workflowing it through so that all the proper organizations that need to be involved, should be involved, are actually involved, and they have a say and they have a voice. And that's where those common goals come from. But the one thing I would like to leave everybody with, I guess, is it's okay to say no, but it's okay to say no with that caveat of always being an enabler, because IT is going to move forward, and your CIO you don't want to force the CIO to overrule your no decision. So it's no with show me how, show me how to get this done properly.
Well, as Craig Herder has just said, office of KNOW as opposed to the office of NO.
Exactly.
All right. Steve, I throw this to you. Oh, by the way, before I go to Steve, is there any specific ServiceNow offer you want to throw out? Anything specific, or just go to servicenow.com?
Just go to servicenow.com. We have,
and I'm assuming they can contact you. Yes,
they can. The latest one that we have out there, of course, is our vaccination management. So we're helping not only the U.S. but all around the globe in terms of ushering people through to get vaccines, to get reminders for their second vaccination. So again, this is all germinated on our workflow solutions and on our platform.
All right. Very good. All right. Steve, any last thoughts on this very specific kind of struggle?
Yeah, before that, just to comment on one of the chats, Larry and Ian, I'm all for helping you guys crowdsource sponsoring for a session, as long as it's all about the acronyms you guys can put together, like the Jack Daniels as a service acronym you came up with earlier. Yes. So, hit me up on the side. I'll throw money in on that one. But ultimately on hacking the IT security divide, for me, it's take the time. If you're going to have a conversation about goals, when you're working on your goals and prioritization, make sure you have time scheduled with leadership in the IT organization or the security organization. Be deliberate in your actions. Don't expect people to be on the same page as you. Don't expect people to be able to just read your mind in either one of those organizations. So be deliberate, take the time to sit down and go through and discuss why you have these prioritizations. How does this impact what they have prioritized? So you can minimize the amount of times you guys are going to butt heads against each other as you're trying to get work done, because there's going to be differences, but ultimately if you're taking the time and being deliberate in your communications, then you're gonna remove most of the challenges.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Steve Gentry, who is the CSO over at Clary, and also Jeffrey DeMuro, who is the Deputy CISO over at ServiceNow. I want to thank the audience for being as awesome as you always are. I greatly appreciate that. Please, everybody click the link at the very bottom of the screen. We're all going to roll over to the chat. I need to move my lights and I switched camera and everything. So just give me about 60 seconds to do exactly that. But we're going to make this all happen. Please join us at the one-on-one meetups. It's a lot of fun if you've never done it. We need more people to join us. All right. See you, everybody. Bye. Take us out, Andrew.